how did their transition happen? Well, it happened with a handshake, and you're taking over, and this is what we're gonna. It was very simple. Now with the price of things, it's not that simple anymore, and you have to be willing to look at other ways and creativity. So, and they didn't know the answers, which was totally okay. But I was so mad because we'd been talking about transition for a year, and that was a really tough year because I was like, I thought we were doing this, like we were supposed to be, done by now, and I was very impatient, right?
Welcome to the Flaman Connect podcast, where we share real stories, experiences, and insights from people who know agriculture today and care where it's going in the future. Which province is known as the buckwheat capital of Canada?
Is there a multiple choice on this one?
No, well, you pick. There's only 10 provinces.
Instead of sounding stupid and just throwing out the first thing that comes to mind, I'm going to start waiting for the options.
Okay. Just disclaimer: there's no more multiple choice questions.
Okay, now I know.
Let's think this through. Like I don't know, in Saskatchewan. Man, every time we talk about grain, though, I feel like the answer is Saskatchewan. Just to be fair, but Saskatchewan.
I would say Manitoba, but it could be Alberta too.
Yeah, Manitoba produces over 70% of the country's buckwheat.
Yeah.
I was going to say, where are the little rascals from?
If you would have said something like Nova Scotia, I'd be like, okay, how and why? What's so special about it? And, but thank God it's a prairie province.
The only buckwheat I've ever had to deal with is just from a weed standpoint. I've never actually seen a buckwheat crop.
When you cut your teeth in the grain cleaner world, buckwheat's like, kind of a pain in the ass, actually.
And it wraps around the header, and there's all sorts of fun stuff.
Yeah. So, the growing conditions in south central Manitoba are kind of the best for growing buckwheat in the country. And most of it goes to Japan.
For what?
For noodle production, flavoring. Yeah.
Buckwheat things.
So, they use it like for the aroma and for making noodles. Yeah.
Yeah. Who'd have thunk?
Yeah. We're joined by John Stratton, the parts and service manager here at Flaman, and we're talking about the little things that Flaman offers that make a big difference.
May not seem like a big deal now, but when you're pressed in the field, you'll be glad to have it.
So our grab and go kits have been huge. They were developed by our team internally here, and they kind of were created out of a bunch of small parts kits, kits of O-rings and nuts and bolts and fasteners and electrical connectors that we were stocking on our shelves selling individually. And we felt there would be a huge value if we could create a kit that a business, farmer or on your trailer, you could have this small toolbox with a collection of these items with you at all times. When we think about the ag thing, sometimes an O-ring can have you down for hours. And when you talk about the cost of production, even the cost just to run like a large tractor and air seeder, if you're down because of one O-ring, that can be hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. So how do we create a convenient kit with a bunch of these small items that quite often individually you don't stock, but if you bought them as one convenient kit, you could have a lot of that stuff on hand when you're down. So we started selling those last spring. They started really to take off now, but we've had feedback from the field from customers. I blew an O-ring. I'm 45 minutes from town. Turns out town didn't even have it. I would have had to went into Regina or Saskatoon to get it. I opened up my Flaman grab and go parts kit. I had a small kit of a bunch of different sizes of O-rings. I had the one I needed. That one O-ring more than paid for the kit itself. And so I think these large kits cost $750. There's a bunch of different items in them. I think you can see them online.
Isn't there 3 different sizes of grab and goes, or is that for the trailer?
So there's one large one, and it kind of fits a bunch of different markets, mostly ag, but also construction and whatnot. But then there's 3 different sizes for the trailers. So the success we had kind of in ag and construction with the large kit we wanted to create something like that could provide value for trailers. So we have 3 different sizes for the trailers. So when it comes to trailers, a lot of the items are, what are some of the common items you're going to need when you've got this trailer on the go? So it could be tie downs, wheel nuts, connectors, electrical connectors, whatnot. And
there's wheel chocks.
And so we made a small, medium, and large one for the trailers, depending on who the customer was. I think
if you're a weekend warrior versus a semi-driver.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can benefit from the items in there. And on the trailer side of things, a ton of those, just the trailer sales team sells them right with the trailers. There's hardly been a customer that when a trailer sales guy explains what's in the different kits, this is a good item to have with your trailer at all times. And I think more often than not, a customer is taking, one of them, and some of them are even buying more than one because they have other trailers at home that they want to have those items with. Yeah. So
brilliant.
Yeah.
Thanks, John. It's really cool how the little things can make a big difference, especially when you're in a bind and you have those little things at your fingertips. Now it's time to welcome our special guest. He's an advisor for Exceed Grain Marketing. Welcome, Mike Ferguson.
Thank you.
Growing up, where were you born? Were you raised? What was growing up like?
So born and raised in Melfort, Saskatchewan, so northeast. I gotta remember, not everyone knows where Saskatchewan is when you go south of the border. So small city. I actually started school in Star City for a few years, and then switched to Melfort. So did the country school kind of thing, and then high school. Went out to Nate, the big city. So I was 18, and it was like, yeah, I had a sister out there, a cousin out there. Let's go somewhere else. So did some finance first, and then I did accounting afterwards. So that's what I have for school. But growing up, it was kind of, when you grow up in a small town, you played every sport there was because they needed every kid to play every sport to have a team. And lots of times I would play like up with my older sister's teams. I would play down, like my younger sister played girls hockey, and lots of times I was a goalie for the other team because they didn't have enough players, and I didn't play goalie. But
it was you or the shooter tutor.
Yeah, so I was like, can you fill in, right? And
that's unreal.
so you get like little towns around there. Kinisno, for example, my uncle lived there. He would pull me up all the time to play with Kinisno. Like I wasn't even part of the team, but I was at the rink. My gear was in the back of mom and dad's vehicle, and you're doing everything. So
suit up.
Yeah, I think I grew up. It's easier for me to list the sports that I didn't play than the ones that I did, right? So you kind of jack of all trades, master of none. I think that's a saying.
So if you think back to your childhood, what's a core memory that really stands out?
I would say like we were always so busy as kids because all my siblings did sports and other activities too. So it was a lot of time with my grandparents. And that was, some people don't have that ability. So both my grandparents were in Melfort. So I got to spend a lot of time with them because my parents were running with my siblings to hockey or ball or whatever. And it's like, you don't have anything today? Sorry, you're staying here or else you're tagging along, right? So lots of time with grandparents when I was little. And I was very fortunate because they passed away when I was younger. So I didn't get that opportunity when I was 14, 15, 16. So
tell us about or educate us on the 3 businesses that you're operating. One being the farm.
Yeah. So we got the family farm. So I guess it's technically like the 4th generation. Mm-hmm. I actually got asked last week if we're approaching that century mark, and it'd be in the 30s when they settled from Lorburn. So a few more years yet. My wife is really involved in the farm. Like she's an agronomist. She's, we got her seeding now a little bit, got her driving grain cart. I taught her how to spray last year. So she's really involved and liking it. With the farm, we have my mom and dad that still help. And then my uncle too, he helps as well. So it's a 3,000 acre farm, but really there's like 5 of us that help run it. It's not just one person, right? So having that team.
Tell me about the family dynamics on your farm. You got 4 siblings.
Yeah.
There's 3 of them clearly that aren't involved in the same farm you're involved. I have, 12 or 13 cousins. We're all within 5 years of each other. I got 2 siblings. 2 of my siblings work here in the same business as me. A couple of my other cousins do too. And that's our family business. And although it's very different from a farm, it's also not very different from it's a family business. So I'm always interested to know and see the dynamics and how people work together, and what are maybe some things you've done in preparation for that, or maybe what are some of the fallouts you've had that have led to, you know what I mean? I'll leave that wide open for you to talk about it, but I just always appreciate the family dynamics. And then maybe a part two to that too is just the transitioning of it, the transition of wealth, how does the business go? Did you say fourth gen? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, how does the farm continue to do that? And it's pretty
nothing
pretty
like
wide
a
open.
small question, hey?
Yeah.
So our transition went really well. It started off what I would say rough, because it's like, yeah, we want to transition. What's the role? We got started.
Let's back up. Who's we?
So I was engaged at that time. We just got engaged to my wife, Regan, and then my mom and dad. So they had the farm. There's no siblings there on the farm. And so we're like, yeah, okay, we're going to start transitioning some control, because everything had to flow through dad, right? Dad, you need to sign off on it. I don't want to do this. Okay, can we become partners, or what does this look like longer term? And I said, to be honest, like from my business, if I'm going to grow it, I kind of want some security on what's going to happen down the road, right? Like I don't want to be 15 years into this and then have a sibling come back and be like, oh, now I'm half the farm because I'm farming with you, right? Like, so our transition started off very rough, because we sat down with a guy and he said, yeah, let's do this. And he started asking my parents questions, and they didn't know the answers, which was totally okay. But I was so mad, because we'd been talking about transition for a year, but they never actually really thought about those questions that were going to come. And it took them time. It took them a year to really, what do we want? What do we need? And that was a really tough year, because I was like, I thought we were doing this. Like we were supposed to be, done by now. And I was very impatient, right? And it taught me a big lesson is it's their journey too. And if they weren't ready to answer those questions, I can't force them to do that, because if you force them to pick a side by the end of this date, that there's probably only going to be more problems down the road. So it took them time to really come to the plan. What do they need? What do they want? Talk to my other siblings. Like, hey, you sure you don't want to farm? Yeah. And so it was slower than I anticipated, but I think that really set the base for where our farm is today and that transition. And it set the base for the transition of wealth too, because you gave everyone a chance to come back. You had those conversations when it was 1,700 acres, not 3,000 acres. And everyone was aware of that, right? And you can't predict the future 10, 15 years out, but you should revisit your transition plan every year. What's changed? What hasn't changed? So when we started the transition, my younger sister was still in university. How is she supposed to know who she's going to marry and what she's going to do and where she's going to live? She couldn't. It's not fair to put that on her when she was 20, 21 years old, right? So we make a point of using professional lawyers, accountants. So you have corporate lawyers that specialize in this stuff.
Yeah.
We made that jump, right? Because as farms get bigger, it gets very complex. As you bring in a wife now and, her parents' farm, okay, what does this look like? You bring in my sisters get married too, right? Like, so there's other siblings coming into the family as well. So to make sure that we have corporate lawyers that specialize in this stuff gave you the confidence to going forward in what you have. So they always talk about like the 3Ds, death, divorce, and disability, right? Like, that was huge, because I'm the only Ferguson kid farming. What happens if something happens to me? And there's a lot of tough conversations you had, because you don't want to think about what happens if I die? What happens if I'm disabled? Or what happens if you're divorced? Like, but those are three things that are huge risks for not only the farm today, but for my parents. And it wasn't easy having those conversations, because like with my wife, she's like, well, I feel like kind of on the outside. I'm like, I get it. But I said, if we were having this conversation with your parents and I was the one coming in, I would probably feel the same way, but they would want to protect their farm for you.
Yeah.
And so just I think there was a period of there where we had to mature and be like, we need to have these grown up adult conversations. It doesn't mean that this is going to happen or this, but we have to, one, acknowledge that there's risk. We have to put a plan in place and be like, what's fair versus what's equal. And that's the one thing with transition is fair is not equal.
Yeah.
Right. We've heard that in every farm transition. So yeah. Does everyone who's not a part of the farm realize that today? And when you have them say, yeah, we acknowledge that, you know, my one older sister's been in Edmonton since she was 17. She realized that, yeah, Michael's been there doing this and growing the farm and there's sweat equity in there, right? But it was important for her to acknowledge that or realize that. And so I think the people that we use in our succession ultimately guided us towards a very successful transition. And still to this day, I don't think farms realize you get what you pay for. So sometimes, I don't want to pay for this because I'm going to do it myself. And it's like, buddy, you're running a $5-10 million farm, $20 million farm, and you're scared to spend $10,000 on this.
Mm-hmm.
That's a wrong way. But in 40 years ago, people didn't have the money to do that. It wasn't as complex. It was, you're going to take this over or whatever, right? So again, things change from 40 years ago to now. So a lot of the guys retiring now, how did their transition happen? Well, it happened with a handshake and you're taking over and this is what we're going to, it was very simple. Now with the price of things, it's not that simple anymore. And you have to be willing to look at other ways and creativity. So
I think it's interesting that at a 3,000 acre farm, which can be a very healthy farm, but in no means do people now relate to that as like a big farm, at least, in the prairies where we're from. That's a massive farm in other areas. To use the word and say, well, you get a corporate lawyer. It's like, what are you talking about? A 3,000 acre farm could never be big enough for a corporate lawyer. It's like, are you kidding me? There was millions and millions of dollars worth of equipment and land and, that is no different and often way bigger than lots of other small businesses. Actually way bigger than a lot of people that run a bit, whether we're talking restaurants or all the other things that you could have a business, right? And I just think it's so cool that, another guy that we talked to on the podcast said the same thing. Like, no, we sat down, we had some tough conversations. We brought in experts. He talked about being an expert in certain stuff. And I live by that. I don't like paying people for stuff that I can do, but I like paying people for stuff they can do better than me. So there's a time where
value, I think they call that value.
Wow. Right? Or what's your time worth? Yeah. So, and here's the other thing too. I'm a commerce kid. I can do my own taxes. I've done them. I also started paying someone to do my taxes and I make more money by the difference in what I pay them to what I don't screw up and what comes back is night and day. And I use the same person who I've used for years. The drywalling's another one, or even grew up in a bit of a university house where there was some drywall and stuff that needed to happen. Anyway, I'll come over and help you drywall or paint your place. I'm not doing it in my house because I'm not very good at it. Yeah. And then I have to live there and look at it. I'm really happy to pay someone to paint something and it looks good and they're fast and there's no mess. And then Caitlin's not yelling at me and I'm not yelling at her. Like, what? There's certain things that you get an expert to do. And I think it's tough for a farmer that can literally do almost anything. And that's a mentality I think that's ingrained in what makes a lot of farmers successful is you do not waste a dime getting someone to do something that you can do or put yourself in a category that you're not. I'm not getting a corporate lawyer to have mom and dad. We're going to sit down, we're going to talk, and we're going to... No, there's more to it than that.
But if you go back 30 years ago, farmers probably never valued their time like they do today.
Now, I would say, yeah.
Right? I got all day to do this. Okay, you got all day to do one job, but in today's world, I have 2 consulting businesses that I work outside the farm. This farm has a trucking business. This one has a welding side gig, right? They've added other sectors to their business to add value.
Yeah.
And so I think in today's world, the farmers are realizing my time has value. I can go out to Alberta and work on the rigs and make X amount, or I can stay at home and do this. So that, that's, I think farmers today are putting a value on their time. And that's where they probably didn't do that 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So that habit of I need to do everything, I can do everything is still there in that more experienced generation versus the younger generation.
Yeah.
And I think we're starting to see that transition, because as a decision making power goes from the baby boomers to the next generation, the younger generation is saying, it's okay to not know everything, Dad. It's okay, because there's people out there that will help me. But 40 years ago, if you needed help, it's like you were frowned upon, probably.
Yeah.
That's what an assumption I'd make, because people didn't like asking for help.
Yeah.
Today, people will ask, they'll go on Twitter and say, hey, I need help with this. What's this or what's that? And people are willing to ask for help, where 30 years ago, you didn't ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the key there is finding trusted people to work with, because, I mean, this industry, like any other industry, there's a lot of people that are out there just for their own profitability, and there are people are out there that are out to help their customers, and in turn, the spin-off benefit is some profitability to help their business run.
Yeah.
And to decipher through which one is leaning one way or the other way is a difficult thing.
You should see like a farmer's face when you say, like, don't buy this. I think you should go somewhere else. And they're like, you're telling me not to buy from you, to go somewhere else because of whatever reason? They're like, yeah, this is better for you. And the look that they kind of give is like, really? You're not, like, weird. And you start to develop that trust where it's like, to be honest, I want to work with you the next 30 years. I could care less about 1 year. Like, I'm in it for the long haul. And I want to be that guy that you call when you have this. And I get it. I can't be the best all the time. I will never be that person. But hopefully I'm your first call.
Yeah.
You have a lot of things on the go other than your farm.
Yeah.
Speak to some of the other things that you, as well as your wife, Regan, have on the go.
So I guess I started out doing consulting on grain marketing. So when I worked at, was it Farm and Garden Center, I guess. That's when I started at John Deere. They had a program there where they did like precision mapping and work with a company called Agri-Trend. And I had just spent 2 years driving around with the precision guide, installing auto steers, helping guys. I was like, well, I did that for a couple summers as a summer student. I can do that. So I actually looked into that side for being like the rep in the Melfort area, but then they had like a grain marketing side. And I was like, oh, this is better. This is my forte. So being the numbers guy, I started consulting then. I guess I would have been 20 when I started that. And I still do it today. So that's the company, one of the companies, Exceed Grain Marketing, that I work with. So yeah, I've been doing that for 14 years, working on cost of production, return on investment, sensitivity analysis, risk management, cash flow, that sort of thing. So 14 years of doing that. In that time, the last 7 years, I guess I've started consulting on more ESG, carbon programs, biodiversity, water management side. So being a farmer and then having the number side down pat, working with a lot of guys, I've been doing that consulting now for 7 years, but it's gotten to the point where it was so busy, we've actually spun out another company from that. So that's called Collective Impact. And so we're working with CPGs, working with NGOs, working with government on trying to implement change in the prairie landscape by doing cover crops, intercropping, reducing nitrogen, wherever the farmer sees that they want to go. Every farmer's at a different stage. Some guys are, 10 years into this, they're used to it. Some guys have cattle, so they go, yeah, I can do all this stuff. And if it doesn't work out, I can feed cattle. Some guys are the conventional grain guys that just, I want to grow wheat and canola and go from there. And so I've started consulting on that. So actually last week I was in Chicago presenting at a food and summit beverage conference. So I was up there with a lot of big names, General Mills, Alice, Danone, National Corn Growers Association, and Indigo. So there's 5 of us up there talking about how do we create change that a lot of the public want in agriculture today when it comes to ESG and more environmentally friendly products. But how do you make money as a farmer?
Mm-hmm.
So,
what is an ESG? You said ESG, CPG, and NGO. Can you define those for us, please?
yeah, environmental social governance, ESG, NGO, non-government organization, and CPG is like a consumer packaged good company. So,
Gotcha.
yeah, so it gets into like with carbon credits, you have your scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. A lot of the companies have focused on scope 1 and scope 2 now. Scope 3 is when it starts to be like, what is our carbon footprint of the products that we're buying? And our products are oats, canola, wheat, barley. So how do we lower that? We have to lower that by working with producers to lower their own carbon footprint.
So are we going down a path where on the packaging of the goods that we buy, there will be a carbon footprint number associated to it?
Yeah, I think we've kind of saw that evolve in the last 10 years. Like if you look non-GMO, that sticker, or organic, right? Gluten-free.
Mm-hmm.
So we've already saw a lot of labels come to the marketing. One concern now is greenwashing. Okay, now what does low carbon mean? Well, low carbon to you might mean something different, than Mitch, a different value or a different level, right? So now it's how do you measure that? What's an agreeable standard?
Yeah. So greenwashing would be just fueling the perception, right?
Yeah. And we don't want that, right? Because we don't want, I think there's lots of opportunities to do good things and make improvements, but we don't want to greenwash it to tell it it's more than what it is. Because at the end of the day, you can't just quit putting fertilizer down on a farm. Everyone would love that. The public would love that. You go to like these bigger cities. We probably don't see it in Saskatchewan, but when I was in Chicago, the conventional dairy side was smaller than like the oat-based, almond-based milks.
Really?
And I was like, oh. Because in Melfort, it's got like one little section and that's it. But you go to these bigger cities and it was kind of an eye-opener in downtown Chicago. What you see on the shelves and the different labels and what they're selling.
We were just talking about the perception in the ag industry that we are major carbon emitters without any consideration to the carbon sequestering. And specifically talking about the kids' perception of that. And how do you speak to that? And how do we educate young people or even, I'll say, urban people on the benefits of agriculture versus the negatives?
So I think we have to go back, I'll go back 30 years ago, right? So a lot of the people that are in decision-making roles now, first thing they say when they introduce themselves, I was from a farm, right? I grew up on a farm.
I just had this vent the other day.
Well,
but
30 years ago,
this is good.
30 years ago, a farm is totally different than where it is today. Like we're talking 15 years I've been on the farm, and our farm's been flipped upside down in 15 years. The use of technology, the costs, all that kind of stuff, the practices, it's completely changed.
I cut you off for a second here. Where I was venting about this with when we hire employees, it's like, there's less and less farm kids. I'll just say that there's less and less of them, and it's funny how many people that apply here think it's relevant to be from a farm because we sell. A big part of what we do is relationships with farmers, and the amount of them that are, I grew up on a farm, and I'm just like, oh my God. It's like, I personally just hate when I hear that. I'm like, you grew up on it, eh? Like, what'd you do with that farm?
Yeah.
Or my grandpa had a farm. I love to go visit. And it's like, you couldn't say any more that I don't know much about farming. And I'd rather you just said it like that. Like,
Yeah.
you live in Saskatchewan. You drive past fields and combines and air drills all year long. Like,
Yeah.
that's, you know about farming. I get it. You're from the prairies or whatever. But when someone opens with, I'm from a farm, I grew up on a farm, it's like, oh man.
Yeah.
Like, you probably had a stay-at-home mom then too, right? I bet you still have it. No, like the world changed a bit. Like, I had a stay-at-home mom too because it's the same.
Yeah.
That was common back then. It's a little bit different now.
Well, so my first experience with that, I go to Edmonton.
And sorry, and I cut you off because I just like a day ago had this vent about someone saying I'm from a farm. I'm like, oh man.
So I go to Edmonton and I walk in, I got my John Deere hat on, and everyone's like, oh, who's this guy from, wearing a John Deere hat? I was like, well, I'm from Saskatchewan. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Guy I sit down to next, he goes, I'm from a farm. I'm like, oh, sweet, another farm kid, right? Like, it's like, what kind of like machinery do you have, or like what brands? Like, so are you like a Deere guy, or are you Case? Like, trying to judge him a little bit. And he's like kind of quiet, and he's like, well, we have a Kubota. And I'm like, oh, okay.
This is in Chicago, or where was
No, this is in Edmonton.
Okay, sorry, yeah, you said that. You said
so yeah, like 15 years ago. Yeah, we have a Kubota, and I'm like, okay, well maybe they got like cows or something, right? And I was like, so like, do you got cows? He's like, no. I'm like, well, what else do you have for like stuff on your farm? He's like, well, I got a Yamaha dirt bike. And I'm like, okay, so what kind of tractor is this? Like, I'm assuming it's a tractor. Yeah, we got a Kubota tractor for pushing snow, and then I got a dirt bike. And that was his definition of a farm. He lived on an acreage, had a Kubota tractor, and he had a dirt bike, and that was his. I was like, oh, buddy, that's not a farm. That's an acreage. Like, it's the definition is totally different.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you changed perceptions of agriculture when you were in school in Edmonton?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. 100%. Because you got to learn more what that urban population is like. So like his definition of a farm is completely different. And then you had people that, didn't even know what a swather was. The one guy, he had a BMW in school. He's like, yeah, I got a BMW. And I was like, well, we got a combine that we use for 3 weeks of the year. That's fancy too. Like if you compare dollars of that combine to your BMW, I guess it'd be like, pretty sweet, but we use it for work.
Well, thanks for joining us today, Mike. Our guest today was Mike Ferguson from Exceed Grain Marketing, and I'm your host, Trevor Grinde, along with Mitch Flaman and Regan Kunz, and you've been listening to Flaman Connect.